Lauren has been diagnosed with some significant psychological issues. But her self-esteem issues have really troubled her all of her life, and she found comfort and solace in some people giving her attention.
Luzerne Harrington-Cooper was arrested again.
More accusations today against that teacher who is charged with sexually assaulting 2 male students.
She's already been accused of having sex with 2 other students last year.
Luzerne Harrington-Cooper was arrested again. She was arraigned for a 3rd time.
Was arrested for allegedly making sexual contact with one student and exchanging inappropriate text messages with another.
In the fall of 2013, a 31-year-old woman named Luzerne Harrington-Cooper was an English teacher at Wyoming Valley West High School in Plymouth, Pennsylvania. Plymouth is a town of about 6,000 people, a little over 100 miles north of Philadelphia. Mrs. Cooper, as she was known by students, earned a degree in communications from the University of Scranton in 2005. After college, she earned a teacher's license and began working for the Wyoming Valley West School District. She had a passion for dance since she was a child. Those early dance classes are how she met the man she would later marry, Raphael Cooper. They wed after they'd finished college. They both became teachers. Like his wife, Raphael taught high school students. He was also a professional dancer, and along with his wife, he ran the Cooper Dance Academy in Kingston, Pennsylvania, where the two resided. But it seems Raphael and Lauren's focus on work caused some discord in the couple's marriage. Lauren began to feel unwanted and unimportant. Their bond began to feel more like a business relationship to the young wife than a marriage. On December 13th of 2013, Lauren's second year of teaching, she sent a text message to a young female student. The girl had a brother. I'll refer to him as Keith. Keith was an 18-year-old senior at Wyoming Valley West, and Mrs. Cooper found him attractive. At the time, the young woman was a cafeteria monitor during the young man's lunch period. She told Keith's sister via text that she thought her brother was hot and asked the girl to tell him so. Harrington-Cooper told the girl to pass along her phone number as well. Mrs. Cooper and Keith began texting one another that same day. Soon the two had agreed to get together and hang out. Mrs. Cooper drove over and picked the kid up near his home. Over the course of the next week, the two would engage in several sexual acts. They would copulate in the teacher's car in various locations, including a parking lot at a local elementary school and another at this church. They had sexual intercourse twice, and the teacher performed oral sex on the student on 3 occasions. Beyond these sexual interactions, Lauren has said that Keith was an intelligent young man with whom she could have real conversations, and that his attention made her feel good about herself. He had a way of making her feel attractive. The clandestine encounters between Mrs. Cooper and Keith were uncovered after the young pupil borrowed his mother's laptop to do some homework. While using the computer, he happened to correspond with Mrs. Cooper via a messaging application. Later, Keith's parents found the sexually explicit messages between their son and the teacher. Keith's parents came to the school and informed administrators of the situation. The school administration determined, based on information provided by the parents, that the teacher in question had to be Mrs. Luzerne Harrington-Cooper. Administrators contacted the police. The police interviewed Keith, and he admitted that he had been involved with the teacher and told them the preceding story. On December 19th, just 6 days after she initially reached out to the teenager, Mrs. Cooper was arrested and charged with institutional sexual assault and was released on $25,000 bond. A student at the school recalled that in the days leading up to Mrs. Cooper's arrest, the normally strict teacher seemed, quote, more happy.
She was strict, but towards once everything started happening, you could tell something was changing, and she seemed more happy.
Rumors involving the woman and the student had begun to spread.
But he told us that a lot of people inside Wyoming Valley West High School know who is involved in this case.
Mrs. Cooper was suspended without pay following the arrest. 3 weeks later, on January 9th of 2014, The accused predator was arrested again, now charged with institutional sexual assault and corruption of minors. The new allegations were that in October of 2013, a couple of months before she began carrying on with Keith, Harrington-Cooper told a young female student that she found one of her male schoolmates good-looking. This was a 17-year-old boy who I refer to as William. William later left a note on the teacher's desk, which included his cell phone number and a heart. Mrs. Cooper and William began texting and emailing back and forth. The digital discussions were explicit in nature, with the teacher expressing her desire to have intercourse with the youngster. At school one day, the boy asked the teacher for a piece of candy. The teacher replied, quote, "All the candy you need is right here." Mrs. Cooper was sure to warn young William to keep their communications confidential, or she'd be in trouble. This went on for a couple of weeks. Then one day, William picked Mrs. Cooper up at her home, and the two drove around for about 90 minutes. Afterward, he brought her back home, and they sat outside in his car making out. On a weekend in November, the teacher contacted the boy at about 2:30 a.m. and arranged to meet him. They drove to the nearby town of Edwardsville and parked on a residential street. There, the teacher told the kid that she wanted to have sex, but couldn't because she was on her period. So instead, she performed oral sex on the teenager. The short-lived, illicit interactions between Harrington-Cooper and William ended that month. Young William began to feel uncomfortable with the situation, and when he tried to pull out of the relationship, Cooper texted him saying, quote, "What 17-year-old doesn't want to have sex with his 31-year-old teacher?" The relationship was discovered during the police investigation into the first case. Following her arrest for this second forbidden affair, she was again released on $25,000 bond. On January 22nd, a little over a month after her first arrest, she resigned from her position with Wyoming Valley West High School. On January 28th, Harrington-Cooper was arrested for the third time and charged with improper interactions with two more teenage boys. Early on in the previous school year, Mrs. Cooper's first year teaching, she and a 16-year-old boy, who I refer to as Thomas, began having intimate discussions in person and via text. The conversations were often sexually explicit. The two would discuss Cooper and her husband's sexual relationship and problems the woman was having in her marriage. Mrs. Cooper invited him to her house on 3 occasions. During his second visit to the woman's home, the teacher lifted her shirt and showed the boy a tattoo of a butterfly on her breast. She told the kid how much fun they would have if they lived together. Thomas and Lauren would continue to communicate into the next school year, and even after she was arrested in December of 2014 for her escapades with young Keith. Thomas got the impression from Cooper that the door was always open to engage in sex with her. The two would flirt back and forth, and there was always a certain vibe, the teen has said. At some point during the 2012-2013 school year, Cooper asked Thomas to tell his friend, a 17-year-old student who I'll refer to as Daniel, that she thought he was hot and that she had a thing for him. Thomas passed along the message and tried to hook his friend up. One day, Thomas drove Daniel to this shopping center parking lot and dropped him off. Mrs. Cooper was there waiting for him. Daniel got into Lauren's vehicle. The two began fondling one another and discussed having sex. The young man felt uncomfortable, however, because they were not in a secluded area and the two did not engage in intercourse that day. Mrs. Cooper and Daniel continued to communicate via text following the rendezvous, and the teacher told him to be sure to delete the messages so that she wouldn't get in trouble. Like Thomas, Daniel continued to communicate with the teacher into the next school year and even after her initial arrest. After this third arrest, she was again released on $25,000 bond, and a judge ordered her to undergo a psych evaluation. Lauren has said that she finally appreciated the gravity of her situation following her first arrest and as she was being fingerprinted and processed. Lauren's husband forgave her for her infidelity.
I don't want anybody else. I don't want to go anywhere else. I've had too many years built up with her, too many good memories.
They sought to heal their relationship through church, and were both baptized in September of 2014. That month, Raphael and Lauren sat for an interview with ABC News and discussed the ex-teacher's scandalous liaisons.
But how is it that it didn't somehow occur to you, this is wrong, this is a kid?
It did, but it was hard to break away from it.
Also in September, on the 25th, Lauren Harrington-Cooper pleaded guilty to 2 felony counts of sexual contact with students and 2 counts of corrupting minors. Immediately after her guilty plea, she was sentenced to 9 to 23 months in prison and was taken into custody. Before handing down the sentence, a Luzerne County, Pennsylvania judge, Michael Vau, told the former teacher, quote, "You abused your trust, exploited children, and destroyed your career for no good reason," unquote. The scandal at Wyoming Valley West High School prompted the school district to enact a new policy prohibiting students and teachers from communicating via telephone unless a second school official is present at the time of the call. In December of 2015, one of Mrs. Cooper's victims, who had turned 20 years old by that time, filed a lawsuit against the disgraced teacher and the school district seeking an undisclosed amount. Lauren Harrington-Cooper was paroled in August of 2015 after serving about 11 months behind bars. She is now a registered sex offender and will remain in the registry for a total of 25 years. What's up, y'all? Thanks once again for tuning in. Thanks for liking. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for sticking around to the end. Thanks for helping me to grow this channel. About a month ago, I teased for you guys a special project that I'm working on. I'm actually still working on that video, and I'll be posting that as soon as possible. I'm actually working with someone else on that video, so finding time to connect and communicate and collaborate and finding time to get on the same page when you and the other party both have busy schedules can sometimes be a struggle. But I am working on that video and I will be posting it as soon as possible. But once again, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate all you guys to the fullest. Hope all is well with all of you. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.